people from the Older People's Forum. And we'll move now then into item 1, which is attendance. 2 apologies for absence, there isn't any. And for the minutes of the 26th of November. We'll go through these. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. Somebody move the true record? Thanks very much. Any matters arising out of those minutes? Anybody wants to raise? No? If not, then we'll move on to the next item, which is action sheet. Chief Executive.
Just there for members' information, Leader, unless there's questions.
And then on to item 6, which is the eligibility criteria for adult social care services, which is Sue.
Excuse me, Leader. Declarations of interest.
We bring in the monitoring officer to talk about matters of interest. Yeah.
Thank you, Leader. As usual, I've had discussions with members beforehand, and I'm aware that there are 2 declarations. In fact, Leader, there are 2 personal declarations by you. One is that you are a council-appointed director on the SRSBS Limited. That's item 13. And, of course, the officer presenting item 10, Robert Wellington, is your son, and you always make declarations in relation to that.
I acknowledge both those interests. Right then, Sue.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, members. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to digest the report, so I'll try and pick out the main elements. This is looking to Cabinet to approve a change to our policy in terms of fair access to care eligibility criteria from moderate, substantial and critical to substantial and critical. And I'm looking for Cabinet to implement this change from April for all new service users, and then as people's cases and their needs are reviewed for existing clients of social care. And just to set this in the context, there is a national policy framework called Fair Access to Care and Services, and that guidance was introduced in 2003. And it was recognised that we wanted to ensure that across Wales there was some consistency in the approach to meeting people's social care needs. But it was up to each individual authority which part of the eligibility criteria they wanted to adopt as policy, and to date we've had ours looking at moderate, substantial and critical. You'll notice from the report that only one authority provides statutory social care support for those with low needs. All others, and most others in Wales, are already adopting the policy for critical and substantial. Just a few are left with providing for moderate needs. So it's not trying to prescribe what local authorities can do and how they do it, but is to provide a framework that is consistent across Wales, and obviously we've been in line with that framework ever since 2003. Then if I take you to 3.2, what it refers to there is the document which is Appendix 2, which gives you a sort of an attempt to describe what would be classed as a low need, a moderate need, a critical need or a substantial need. And hopefully you can see from that that it's quite comprehensive. There are 12 different domains of risk that our professional social workers would assess, and they would, through that assessment, come up with that eligibility or level of need. We would never abandon anybody, obviously, and anyone in a low need now, we already provide excellent advice and signposting to third sector or community resources. And one of the things we've been testing this year that you'll be aware of, using some of our investor save monies, is our adult services hub. So that's where we're getting very highly qualified and skilled practitioners being that very first point of contact. And already we're seeing that that's a very useful way of giving people excellent advice, information and support, and signposting to other areas. So we're testing out that that new way of working is quite effective at giving people good advice. We'll still also provide short-term support for people with moderate needs. to get them back in terms of improving their well-being and improving their independence. But what this proposal is seeking to do is to make sure we target our resources at those with the most significant needs, because as I'm setting out there under 4.1, looking at the future demographic pressures in terms of numbers of older people in particular, and the numbers of older people who are likely to require care and support, trying to maintain our existing eligibility criteria really isn't sustainable. It also isn't in line with what Welsh Government are expecting. Welsh Government, under the new Social Services and Wellbeing Bill, are already proposing that there will be a national eligibility criteria, and potentially it's going to be restricted to the substantial and critical. So this policy brings us in line with what will be coming in the next year or two anyway, under the new Social Services and Wellbeing Bill. The other thing I'm pointing out there is under 4.2 is obviously the resource situation of the Council in line with all councils across the UK. Trying to continue doing what we're currently doing is just not sustainable. And you'll know that for next year we've got a 3.1 million shortfall, and that's just to stand still and meet demands. But that does mean we need to make these policy changes to meet that 3.1 million shortfall. And the likelihood is, looking forward, resources are going to get tougher and demand is going to get more intense as people's needs increase. So we can't sit back and do nothing. We have to take this action now. We need to be proactive. I've already set out 4.3, and I've got there at that table showing you where we sit relative to all other authorities in Wales. And you can see most authorities have already now moved into that substantial and critical only. And again, just to remind you, that means for the statutory support of social care, where you have an active care management plan with a qualified social worker assigned to you. We're never going to abandon people. We'll make sure they're signposted. And as I've said there at 4.4, I can't give you a definite number on how many people. We'd have to go through every single case and count the existing. But when we've done previous audits, it's about 7% of the people we support. So that's the sort of number we're thinking about at the moment. And obviously that percentage is relative to the total number of people we support in any one year. But that just gives you approximate. So you can see it's less than 10% of the people we support would be impacted. The other thing to point out at 4.5 is, again, just to reiterate, this is not about saying to people, you're no longer eligible, therefore we can't help you. We will still provide short-term intervention and signpost people to the appropriate agency as best we can to make sure that even their moderate risks are better managed. I'm setting out there at 5, just to highlight raising the eligibility criteria is a policy decision, and it's right for Cabinet to make that decision. But we can't withdraw services from individual clients unless we have that negotiation with that client and their family, and that will be done obviously on a client-by-client basis, where somebody's already having any package of support on a long-term basis. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to convene a special meeting at the Have Your Say Forum, which is the forum I use to test out various policy changes or significant changes in social care, and that has a number of user representatives on. I'm convening one of those in February to discuss not just this policy change, but some of the other financial pressures for the Council, and particularly within our service area, and any other policy changes. So again, we'll make sure that people have a good understanding of why we're making these suggestions. I've set out there the policy impact assessment, and that's attached as Appendix 1. And just one of the things to highlight there is, I've mentioned there, making sure we don't have any unintended consequences, maybe pressure put onto the health service as a result of these changes. And just to reassure members there, what we do is we hold a weekly facts panel. That's the Fair Access to Care panel. So that makes sure that we're being consistent, no matter which operational team is considering somebody's needs. They're all assessed by a multi-professional group, which includes clinical skills input, to make sure that, again, we're robust in terms of our decision-making on a case-by-case basis, especially where somebody comes who may have extraordinary needs that are above the usual needs that we meet on a daily basis. So it's again ensuring you that there is consistency of approach no matter which social worker or which team presents a case to that panel. So that should give you some confidence there that we'll be able to adopt this new policy should you approve it, minimising any risk to individuals. And I've pointed out there at 6.13 there is both a positive and a negative aspect. The positives is about making sure we're spending our money wisely to meeting the highest level of needs. But I guess there is a slight increase of a risk of increased complaints or members' inquiries as we start negotiating the change with individuals or with various groups. But again, we'll manage that process to make sure we minimise any risk. And I've just pointed that out there again at 7. We anticipate there may be people coming to us asking questions, but I think by being open and transparent, agreeing it as a policy, ensuring there is equity, fairness in the way it's applied, meeting with the Have Your Say group, we are doing everything we can to minimise those risks. I've highlighted their actions to be followed, subject to Cabinet approval, under 8. What we want to do is to, again, it makes sense to start this at the beginning of a new financial year so that we've got time to make sure we support our staff, speak to customer care officers to make sure that we've got some good briefing for all the frontline end before implementation, and we can support people through that change process. So in conclusion then, this policy is in line with the way that the Social Services and Wellbeing Bill is going. It will make sure we target our resources to those with the highest levels of needs. We won't be abandoning people. We'll make sure that we work with individuals and their families to find alternative forms of support where we can do that. And we will monitor through the facts panel the impact of those changes. So my recommendation is that Cabinet approves the changes to the Fair Access to Care criteria and that we implement those changes from April for any new service users coming to us and for existing service users as their needs are reviewed. So we won't go out there looking, we'll wait until the natural review timetable is due and then we'll assess at that point. So happy to take any questions.
Rich, do you want to say something?
I don't think you can really add to Sue's comprehensive run through that report. I think it is important for me to say as the executive member, obviously I'm grateful for colleagues and departments' recognition that social care is where it is, and the next report looking at the cuts to council budgets. But I think Sue highlighted the reality that even a standalone in social care has left this 3.1 million gap. So this report is just one of the measures that we're going to have to take to plug that gap. In an ideal world, it wouldn't be something we're doing. Sue has outlined that we have a very robust mechanism for dealing with it, and it's somewhere that we're going to actually be pushed by the Welsh Government when they finally make their eligibility decision into in any event. So I appreciate the Cabinet colleagues' support for social care, but by no means we're out of the water. We will be bringing more reports like this to plug that gap.
Thank you, Rich. Anthony Hunt.
I thank Richard for that recognition and for the way that both Sue and himself have approached this budget, taking an approach that recognises the strain across the council rather than just taking a silo mentality. And as you say, it's one of the tough choices that unfortunately we have to make, whether we like it or not. As Sue said, when demand increases and money's ever tighter, we've got to try and focus our support on those who are in the greatest need. And I'm glad that you've said that we'll do that with a sort of a sensitive approach too. But as Richard said and as Sue inferred, it's one of the unfortunate tough decisions that we have to make, and I think it should act as a sort of maybe a point of pause for thought, really, with some of the other measures that can sometimes create sort of a lot of angst and a lot of concern. They have to be sort of measured against the kind of measures that we're having to take, like it or not, in areas like social care.
To that, anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, go on, Dave.
Just one comment. It strikes me that if we have a robust and adequate mechanisms in place to safeguard against those people who've been taken off the moderate list, why is it we haven't used that robust and other alternative system before? Because what it does shore up is that if I'm anticipating your answer that we were better off with the system as it was than relying on this more robust or perhaps robust substitute, then there is a difference between the level of services going to be provided by the robust substitute and the system that's already in place. But if that isn't the case, why didn't we do this before?
Just to clarify, the robust system is in place, has always been in place. This is a direct impact of the budget cuts. And this is about trying to make sure we're cutting our cloth according to our means. In an ideal world, you'd want to be able to provide support to people with low needs, moderate needs. This is genuinely about trying to make sure that we're using the most expensive part of the system for those people with the highest level of need. And we won't be abandoning anybody. We will be making sure we talk regularly with the third sector, as one example, meeting with individual family members to see what else can be done to maybe reduce a package of support for somebody. But the primary position will be against a risk assessment. So risk to independence, risk to safeguarding, and that will be what will determine how much level of support and service somebody would be eligible to receive.
John? I appreciate your response, and I'm all in favour of making savings where savings have to be made, and there have to be priorities, and I'm sure that you've met those priorities by initiating this particular project. But it remains the question. The robust substitute that you suggest isn't a substitute, it's always been there. If that is adequate for purpose, why did we need this tertiary, this third tier, if you like, this moderate system that is costly? Why do we have that in the first place? Because it seems to me that if we are moving away from that third tier, that moderate tier, and supplanting that with a system that's been there anyway, and it is robust and fit for purpose, then it could have been robust and fit for purpose all the time.
Okay, I'll tell you the way I'll answer that then is moderate needs were seen to be a potential preventative way of reducing somebody's needs or preventing deterioration later on. And I've highlighted that in the report, that one of the risks in moving from moderate to substantial and critical is those people who you can help with lower level support for longer. The aim of that would be to stop them deteriorating and therefore becoming critical or substantial. In the current economic climate, we can no longer afford to keep providing for those moderate needs as well. In an ideal world, you would still want to, but the reality of where we are at the moment is it's better for us to make sure we focus our resources on the highest level of need.
Just a point, you said you've presumably all read the report. Well, I've read the report. Whether I've digested it is another thing. But I'd just like to ask a question on 9.1, if I may, where you've stated in there about raising the eligibility criteria will restrict access to statutory social care services to those clients. So are you saying we are statutorily obliged to provide the service, but making these changes we still conform to our statutory obligations? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Because I was going to just another quickly add on to that about your moderate care. There are going to be people who will slightly fall through the net, who sort of need moderate needs. How will you deal with those? Because there are going to be people on short-term moderate needs. So if I could link those two.
Okay. There is a statutory requirement that whatever our policy position is, and at the moment it includes moderate, we have to assess and provide support or services within our policy. National government set the overall framework and they give us those 4 different levels, if you like. And as I've already said, most authorities are already now just looking at substantial and critical. So we'll still meet our statutory requirements. As long as you adopt this change of policy, then we'll be still meeting our statutory requirements. And as I've hinted earlier, what that means is people who only have moderate needs would no longer be eligible for the long-term support and services from social care with a designated care manager, a social worker, etc. That doesn't mean we abandon. We might provide short-term interventions. That could be up for 6 weeks. It could be potentially be 6 months. But there wouldn't be an ongoing requirement that those individuals with moderate needs, because we'll help them, if you like, to maximise their independence for a short period of time. Now, in a year, 2 years' time, their needs may change and they may become substantial or critical. Then obviously they would meet our eligibility criteria and they would be part of the formal care management process. But this is a way of making sure nobody slips through the net, that we signpost them to alternative services, work with their families to see what else the families could do to support them in terms of meeting their independence and care needs.
Anybody else want to make a comment? If not, thanks so much for the report. Good report, Sue. All agreed? Sure. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Leader.
Now then, on to item 7, which is Nigel Aurelius, and it's the budget report, medium term. Over to you, Nigel.
Thank you, Leader. Getting close to the end of the budget for 2014-15. I'm sure you'll be pleased with that. This report and then another report to February and a couple of reports to Council. So I'm going to jump straight in the report to section 5 where the new information is. The first part that I bring out is the final revenue settlement that we had just before Christmas, the 11th of December. 2 changes in there that give us a little bit of extra resource. If I was writing extra, I'd put it in inverted commas. One is we gained a smidgen in relation to the council tax base. Effectively, our base went up different to the rest of Wales, so we got a little bit from that. But also, right on the final settlement, the local government minister unhypothecated the former council tax reduction for pensioners scheme grant and put it into the revenue settlement. And it's now for you to decide what you want to do with that. It's unhypothecated. And there it is. Then in 5.2, I make the point about at the final settlement, there was still a lot of grant information that was outstanding, both at a Wales level and a Torfaen level. Since then, we've had some Torfaen-specific grant information. The table gives it and makes the point that they're predominantly as budgeted. Some major ones still outstanding. I think we've had the concessionary fares one or some transport ones relatively recently, within the last 24 hours. But we're still waiting on the Sustainable Waste Management Grant, and we're expecting significant reductions in those, which of course at the moment we can't factor into any detail, but we just have to be alive to. And we had some smaller grants last week where some quite eye-watering reductions, 20-30%. The quantums aren't huge, but they are quite significant. Capital allocations were largely unchanged from the provisional. So in terms of where we are on the budget, we had a major joint scrutiny committee on the 20th of November that went on for 3 or 4 hours, where all the mitigations that services had put forward were considered and as part of a package. And just to remind members, that was every service alleviating their pressures and every service, with the exception of social care and housing, achieving a 4% reduction. Social care and housing had a cash flat line. And as already been said before, and I think we said it at scrutiny as well, personally, I think a cash flat line is equally as hard for social care and housing to achieve as it is for the others to achieve the reductions because of the demand growth. And I would echo the sentiments that have been made in the way that social care have approached that in coming with a balanced set of measures. I provided the hyperlink then in terms of the measures, and we've got the quantums there in terms of what everyone was trying to adhere to. Then importantly, I put in there the conclusion of the Joint Scrutiny Committee of the 20th of November, which was, on the whole, the committees offer their support to the budget mitigation proposals contained within the report, subject to a number of recommendations and actions. And they're all contained within the appendix, and the 3 issues they picked out are also replicated within the body of the report. Now, we've never had a joint committee approach in that way to all the mitigations, and I think that moved our budget process forward. So it would seem to me that nothing fundamental has been highlighted that now should prevent that package of measures going forward from joint scrutiny through Cabinet and then on to Council. The next part of the report brings out some of the corporate issues that we were looking at. Increasing the council tax collection rate, well, we did that through the tax base. Looking at some revised debt arrangements, well, we're in dialogue with the auditors at the moment. We put a proposal to them which we think works, but we want to be technically sound before we move it. But the auditors are considering it. Reducing the unallocated budget and a review of third-party spend. Now, at least 2 of those, reducing the third-party spend and reducing the minimum revenue provision, are not without their risk at this moment in time. We've got to drive the one out, and we're waiting on the auditors. And I'm suggesting that we'll underwrite the minimum revenue provision one if we don't get the results in time. The reason why I'm hovering on that, the savings of the rest of the council would have been significantly higher without those. And I'm carrying that risk, and the whole budget is carrying that risk at the moment. I'm quite prepared to let that go through so that we don't increase the pressure on services at this point in time. In 6.4, then, I sort of say where we are at the moment. With the final settlement, the extra resource there, and with what's left in the unallocated, we've got between 450 to 500,000 still to be considered. And to be considered within the context of the 2 risks that I've just mentioned, which are significantly more than that. There are obviously 4 things that I think you will want to consider when you're considering that, and that will be the basis of your 11th of February Cabinet report. You will obviously want to consider the council tax increase and the council tax level, and I've made the point that each 1% will cost around 239,000. It's obviously not as significant as it used to be because you've got to fund the council tax reduction scheme element and the benefits that are in there. That's why it's slightly smaller. You may want to continue to give council tax support to pensioners as per the grant at a lower level, but you'll want to consider it or not at all. You need to provide some resource for profile. You've had a PDF, you've had a member seminar on profile. There's a desire to avoid compulsory redundancies and manage those through using profile and voluntary redundancy. You need some base budget resource. I think a minimum of that is around 150,000, but again, it's for you to choose. And undoubtedly, there will be some within the old mitigations in terms of underwriting or providing some contingency, depending on how they work their way through once approved, and in terms of the practical application of them. The key policy choices are around key political policy choices are largely around A and B, pensioners grant and council tax. I suspect in February you will want a combination of all of those kind of things in some way, shape or form, but that will be for you as members to decide. A number of the mitigations obviously have staffing implications and staffing posts at risk, and we've always tried to manage those innovatively. We've done another voluntary redundancy trawl. There is significant interest in a voluntary redundancy trawl. I'm sure that's due to a range of factors, and we're reasonably confident that we can manage certainly a significant amount of those at risk, and certainly those who want to be managed in that way. And again, on record, my appreciation to all our chief officers in terms of the flexible way they're approaching that. And as members will know, part of this package of measures, we were going to early pay back of the sale extra loan to reduce base budget savings, and we're going to fund that from reserves. In terms of capital, I'm not going to say too much on that because it's so predicated in relation to 21st century schools. And we continue to push for some progress on that. The Council report that will go next week will contain 2 minor capital approvals, just to one, put a policy position of yours forward, and one to just shift things to help the Welsh Government. There's a section there in terms of updating of risks, which I won't go through. They're there for the record. In terms of the next and final steps for 14-15 and outlining an approach for 15-16, we obviously got the Council report next week to agree the mitigation measures. We've got Cabinet on the 11th of February where you've got to continue your final Council tax level and the final issue to conclude the budget. Council the 4th of March, and obviously then all service areas have to conclude the implementation of their mitigation measures. I think I've made it quite clear to members that austerity isn't a one-year hit in 2014-15, if only it was. It's going to go on for any number of years. I'm suggesting that we need to be modelling for another cash reduction in 15-16, probably of the order of 2.5%, and then probably 1.5% for the following year and 1% for the following year after that. Obviously, you gave a commitment to a 4-year review of the budget of last year. Therefore, as part of your final budget, you need to be making some recommendations for 15-16 and some progress on that, whilst I think, recognising the fact that, the announcement of yesterday is going to be, a major influencer on the decisions. But I would urge you not to be short-termist in those decisions, and still take a medium-term approach. And I've made some suggestions as to the things you may want to be considering. All Chief Officers did identify what 4 and 10% would look like for 15-16 as part of this year's budget. You might want to ask us to examine what a cash flat line would mean again for social care, not just in terms of what it would mean for social care, but what impact it would have on everyone else. You may want to suggest you want to protect schools at 0.6% and a variety of other things, which we can then build into the end budget and build into our financial plan and be earlier again in 2015-16 and sensible in our decisions. There's then a section in terms of monitoring, which shows a continuing improving position, and month 9, which is not in here, is a further improving position. I do make the point in 10.2 that I've excluded significant resource in relation to council tax collection performance. If you remember this time last year when we were doing the budget, we were expecting the council tax reduction scheme to be at 100%, to be at 90%, sorry, and not 100%. And I'm suggesting that we use that resource to both buffer us in terms of welfare, but also give us reserve resilience, because I make the point later that whether it's compulsory or voluntary, we have to fund severance, and that can often be quite significant. So that really is where I want to go in terms of the report, Leader. In terms of what the budget gives, I think a set of measures that are very difficult but doable within the context. I think we've avoided many of the headlines that some councils have had. We're honouring the protection to schools. We've honoured our commitment to the vulnerable by not putting a 4% reduction on social care. I'm not going to suggest it's in any way easy. And obviously the 11th of February will conclude it. And the recommendations are to note the final settlement, approve the mitigation measures which have been subject to joint scrutiny committee, and recommend them to Council, approve a use of some in relation to the Salex loan, note the next steps, note the risks, and note the month 8 monitoring position. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Nigel. Any comments? I'll come to Anthony in a minute, but you can wind up, Anthony. Yeah. John Cunningham?
Yeah, if I could raise a question, actually. Now, it might seem small potatoes in the grand scheme of the budget, obviously, but obviously it has some concern that I know to some of our residents, and that's the reference under grants 5.2 about major grants, which is still awaiting information. Now, that makes me nervous when they hold back on the information, But you did mention that about 24 hours ago you did have some information on the regional allocation to the concessionary fares reimbursement. Now that's something obviously I've had half a dozen people asking me in my ward, you know, what's happening to the bus passes? Well, we don't know that, do we? And I don't know whether you've got any additional information of this that you've had 24 hours ago, but it is something which obviously has a huge impact on public opinions on that particular issue. The other issue is the SUTA allocation. Given the letter that we received yesterday and the fact that there potentially doesn't seem to be any place for SUTA now in the forthcoming financial year, whether that will have to come out of there altogether. And of course the other worrying part for us, and I've got no comment really to make, is the Sustainable Waste Management Grant. But the issue is the SUTA allocation, that's gone now presumably, or that will go in the forthcoming budget for next year. And the issue about the regional allocation to concessionary fares is something that we'd like an answer on.
I mean, I don't know whether Christina's got more information. I mean, I don't have enough information to give you, you know, a firm steer or a firm answer on those points. I mean, it was the SUTA allocation letter that we obviously had yesterday, which we've still got to digest. On concessionary fares, we are expecting a significant reduction in relation to concessionary fares, which is going to have an impact in terms of you know, bus passes and bus travel and the viability of routes. And I think what Welsh Government is doing is looking to pass the problem down to you as elected members when they're directly, they're directly funding it. We won't have the money to make up the shortfall. I mean, that's the bottom. That'll be the bottom of the line of it. And Welsh Government, I agree with you. It makes me nervous when they don't announce things prior to Christmas, and we keep pushing it. But I don't know whether Christina's got any more to add on the SUTA allocation. Or...
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. With regards to SUTA, we've had the letter, and the indication is that all funding that was previously sent via SUTA is now coming into the local authorities directly. So the local authorities now need to have a discussion around how we organise ourselves in the absence of the funding going through SUTA regionally.
Interesting times. John, is that the answer? Or... All right. Anthony?
Okay, then just first of all like to thank Nigel and all those who've contributed to putting together these savings. We've been working on it for some months now, and that's, you know, maybe in some respects a form of an apology to you, those of you who've sat through this sort of process several times now, but I think it's something that's actually a good thing. The budget should be a continuous process rather than an event if we're to properly do the best for our residents and those who work for us. So first a word of thanks for that, because it hasn't been easy, but working together, I think that includes officers, cabinet members and those who took part in an excellent scrutiny session that was, you know, almost 4 hours of looking through the savings, and was really a constructive session involving members and chief officers. I think that's the right approach, to sort of the calm approach to do the best we can in such a difficult situation. As Nigel referred to, that's enabled us to protect employment as much as we can, despite the settlement, and that's something I think is the right thing to do, both in terms of our local economy and for those who work for us, who are, at the end of the day, our biggest asset and our biggest resource. We've also managed to honour the protection to schools, and as Nigel and others said in the previous item, to social care, which, despite having an incredibly difficult time because of the demand pressures, you know, with the standstill budget, we've managed to accept them from the need to cut 4% from their budget, which I think is an important thing for the most vulnerable people in our borough. So just like to really recommend that calm approach and the united approach as we move forward into future years that are going to be equally difficult, and as each year goes by the savings become more and more difficult. Maybe that's something for others to ponder on rather than people in this room, but I'd just like to again point out that the challenges that we face aren't of our choice, but we have to do our best for those we represent. and I hope maybe people in central government will maybe look around the UK at the difficulties being faced by local councils and the tough decisions having to be taken that are having a real impact on communities and on individuals. And I just hope that they see, because sometimes they can be very distant from the impact of their economic decisions, and I really hope they see the human consequences of the decisions they're making and decide to change tack on that front. Now that's the sort of the general sort of question, points out of the way that I wanted to make. The extra resource that Nigel pointed out, I would like to sort of urge caution on that. We're talking about under £500,000 when we've had to make £12 million of savings. So I'll caution against any expectation that can avoid difficult decisions, or that can sort of paper over, the £12 million gap. It just won't, as much as we'd wish that it could. So that first, and secondly, to make an appeal really to what we heard about yesterday in the PDF last week about profile. I think profile is absolutely essential if we're to manage our staff properly and to give them the best chance going forwards. And not to fund that properly would be a grave error in my opinion. The other sort of specific point I wanted to make is that some questions have been raised about sustainability issues about the savings. So I'd like to move under recommendation 12.1 that we approve the savings subject to reassurance between now and Council that we can fulfil our duties in that respect.
Right, thank you for that, Ant. All agreed with the recommendation, please show. Thanks so much. Thank you very much, Nigel. I think you've got to...
Yes, thank you, Leader. I mean, I won't be too long on this report. This is a report that's another one that's, has to come through on its way to Council. The primary reason we've got to consider it this year is because the Welsh Assembly Government put a sunset clause into the regulations last year in 2013-14, which means we've got to reconsider the scheme again. This is the Council Tax Reduction Scheme that was the benefits scheme. The report contains a link to the prescribed regulations. The Council will be asked to approve those. The rationale for approving them is that then we can approve the discretions that are within there. And I do bring out in the report the discretions that we're doing, which are exactly the same as the current ones. It's still going to be a 100% scheme. So where appropriate, people will be cushioned to 100% of the council tax. Our budget contains what we believe sufficient provision to meet those liabilities. I do make the points that others have, that the Welsh Government thinks that any pressure caused by council tax increases should be a matter borne locally. I happen to agree with the Welsh Government on that. You make the decisions about the increase of council tax, therefore that should be something borne locally. I'm not sure that's shared by everyone across Wales. And I also make the point that undoubtedly there's pressure on our budget because of the council tax reduction scheme. I think the Welsh Government support has been more than England, where the full impact of the 10% cut that was made at a UK level has been passed down to local authorities to decide how they want to deal with it. Final part in relation to the budget is, in relation to the report, is to note that the Welsh Government are prompting a fundamental review of the scheme, which they hope is in readiness for 2015-16. And I think they're opening it up for all manner of considerations there, the level of benefit, the level of support, the type of support. But for the moment, this scheme is predominantly the same as last year, the same discretions, and our budget contains allowance for it, and it'll go to Council next week.
Thanks for that, Nigel. Ant, you want to say anything? No? Anybody else? Any comments? If not, all agree with the report, please show. Thank you. I think, Nigel, you've got to stay there even further. Yes, which is item 9.
I'll be even quicker on this report.
Nigel show?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think the Sue show comes back later on in the agenda. We're disappointed that others have actually got some reports on there as well. We like to keep the agenda to ourselves. Welsh Government have introduced two schemes, Open for Business scheme and a new development scheme, and the desire is to try and get properties that have been empty for a continuous period, commercial properties, back in to use. We've got our area non-domestic rates discretionary scheme to take account of Open for Business scheme and new development scheme. We don't think we've got many within the borough that this affects, but this report is just asking you to adopt those two Welsh Government schemes into ours, so that where we do have them, we can give them the appropriate relief. And of course, that's funded through the Welsh Government.
Thanks, Nigel. Any comment? John?
Just a quick clarify this, because the NNDR, the revenue from that, does that all come to the council, or is there an element that goes to the Welsh Assembly?
No, the NNDR in Wales is pooled, and then it goes into the Assembly, and we get a redistribution from the pool. So we've already taken into our budget our allocation that we think is coming from the pool. We don't keep the rates raised locally. They go into a pool and then they're redistributed.
This scheme would be of no financial detriment to us then at all? Would it?
No. This is purely to the benefit of the actual, to try and get commercial properties back into use.
Anybody else? If not, then thanks, Nigel. 3 good reports. Well done. All agreed on this one. Thank you. Now then, item 9, item 10 is South East Wales European project. This is Rob. Linda, do I need to declare again?
Yes, Leader, I think we mentioned it when we dealt with the declarations
Fine.
before. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. This report is, the area affected by this report is South East Wales. The purpose of the report is twofold. First of all, for Cabinet to receive a general update on local government's planning for the next round of European programmes, and secondly, to ask Cabinet to endorse the publication, it's a draft publication, South East Wales EU Prospectus, and that was part of the pack that went out. If I just quickly move to the key messages, we've heard there from Nigel about budget pressures that we're all facing. One of the key things, I suppose, is that European programmes represent an opportunity during the period 2014-20 and will be particularly important for us to hit our corporate priorities as we move forward. Second thing to say is that City Regions is now established, and it's through City Regions that we're the new regional proposals are being developed at a strategic level, different perhaps to the previous programmes. In the South East, we've set up 9 regional thematic groups that are looking at different parts of the draft prospectus and working at proposals around different priorities within both the ERDF and the ESF programmes. As a result of that, we've also set up a Torfaen EU officer group that has membership from all of these 9 thematic groups, so that we can come back, regroup, and look to encourage integration between the themes in Torfaen, and also importantly help us inform ourselves in Torfaen how we allocate match funding to the different proposals. So, in terms of how we've organised ourselves in South East Wales, there's been a regional approach to this. So there's been North and Mid Wales have worked together, West Wales have worked together, and us in the South East we've worked across the 10 authorities that constitute the regional partnership. Obviously, that on there sits the chief executives and the leaders of the 10 local authorities. So in terms of the planning work, the three WRGA European advisors across Wales have been supported by specialist European teams and rural development plan officers, as I said, to look at the draft operational programmes and to look at where best placed local government are to kind of help WEFO, which is the Wales European Funding Office, hit their targets. So we've realised that local government can't do everything, and we've tried to kind of scope narrowly where we could hit some of the programme priorities that have been drafted. So what we have is a series of task and finish groups. They're looking at things like transport, skills, business development through the Local Investment Fund and the Community Economic Development Fund. And these groups have been meeting for sort of the last 10, 12 months to work up proposals. But we've recognised that the work that we've done has been kind of informal because the programmes are not yet approved at the Commission level. The key thing that's holding things up at the moment is there's a UK level partnership agreement which does include a Welsh chapter. The Welsh chapter is really well worked up and the Commission are relatively happy with it, but it's the UK element of the document that seems to be holding up progression. So we've been working very informally. We've actually been holding meetings with Wales European Funding Officer officers in terms of, talking to them about the proposals that we have. But everything has been very informal at the moment, pending the approval, if you like, across the South East of two key documents. One, Christina brought prior to Christmas last year. This is the regional framework. So it sets out a matrix of the kind of the activities and interventions we're looking to do. The second one is this report, which is the prospectus, which basically is a document that supports the work of the South East Wales Directors of Environment and Regeneration Board. So it sets out the key thematic groups there. There's not a massive amount of detail in there in terms of budget allocations and things like that, because the actual EU programme hasn't been approved at the Commission level yet, so it's difficult for us to, to place any budgets on our regional sort of proposals. So really the key thing is then just a bit of an update on that, and secondly, what we're looking for is endorsement of the EU prospectus.
Right, thanks, Rob. Any questions? No? All agreed? Joe? Thanks very much. Thank you, Ron. Cabinet and that. Apologise for that. This item has been deferred. Item 11. We're moving on to item 12, which is consent to further extend the agreement with the Gwent Police and with community support officers. And that is Lyndon. Over to you, Lyndon.
Okay. Thank you, Leader. Morning, Cabinet. The report before you this morning is to seek consent from Cabinet to further extend the existing arrangements we have with the provision of 10 community safety officers within Torfaen. The key messages which would in the report is that the Council currently makes a 33% contribution, financial contribution for an additional 10 PCSOs that have operated in Torfaen for quite some time. You'd recall, or may recall, that I brought a report last year to Cabinet in regard to that, and the report before you now is to further extend that. The current arrangements that we have in place with the provision of these officers will end in March this year, and we are seeking agreement this morning that the continuation of this service is up to and including the 31st of March 2015. Just as some background, we have excellent partnership relationships with both the community safety team and the police community safety officers operating in Torfaen, and that arrangement has continued for some time. And you would have already received a meeting request from Inspector Hassel for the 30th of January in the afternoon, where the Inspector there wants to meet with all members to discuss the provision of the services that the PCSOs operate in Torfaen, and wants to take your feedback from there as part of the ongoing provision of the services. Within your report is an appendix from Inspector Hassel that outlines the current activities and the roles that the PCSOs undertake across Torfaen, and in particular how the PCSOs operate generically with uniformed officers in looking at reducing overall crime. And you would see from a table within your report that over time that's been particularly successful. The provision of this report really seeks that if we wish to continue benefiting from the additional 10 PCSOs, that we continue to make the 33% contribution. The financial contribution is already within the existing budgets, and we are recommending to Cabinet that they approve this report for the provision for next year. Thank you.
Anybody any comments? Yeah, go on.
Yes, thanks for the report, Lyndon. My question is, I was in a public meeting last night, in fact, and high on the agenda was, in fact, it took over the meeting, was the increase on crime. I'm supportive that we have 10 PCSOs, but I do wonder, are they at the risk of losing full-time police officers? Because we seem to see more PCSOs in our communities and not the police officers. And PCSOs are good at what they have to do, but they are limited as to what they can do.
It's difficult to me to answer the capacity for the police service, Councillor Clark, but certainly the additional 10 PCSOs that we contribute to do help to the reduction of the overall crime that we have seen across Torfaen over the last few years. Inspector Hassel is coming to a meeting on Thursday that perhaps your question could be placed to Inspector Hassel, who could be able to give you a better and more rounded answer than I could.
Could I just come back in there? I realise you can't answer the question, but I need to raise it here so that you can pass that information on to the Inspector. This is where we bring the issues of our communities around this table at Cabinet, and I need you to make sure that that message goes back to them.
I've made a note of that, Councillor. Will do that.
It's been some time now since the concept of PCSOs was introduced to the country. As you remember, you was a member of the Gwent Police Authority, as I have been, and UNACPO, the organisation that represents chief police officers at that particular time, warned about, the undermining, really, of the establishment of police officers. Now, it's something that have happened and is continuing to happen. As much as you like it or dislike it, the fact is, PCSOs are cheaper to employ than a police officer. And, it's something we have had to live with, although PCSOs doing a fantastic job. More of them in and around the community, supported by councils like ourselves. Now, it's something that the police service have had to wrestle with, I believe, over a period of time.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'd like to endorse what the Deputy Leader has just said about the work that the police community support officers undertake. I was fortunate, well, not particularly fortunate, but I was able to go out on patrol with a couple of PCSOs in the Pont Newydd area about 10 days ago on a Friday night. And Friday night in Pont Newydd actually feels very safe now. And I was really impressed with the way in which the PCSOs related to everybody. People in the Legal High shop, people in the Ladywell complex, people in shops, people, young lads and girls hanging around the parks, people in the youth centre, all they related extremely well, and there was not a sign of any real issue at all. And I think the statistics in the report demonstrate that since PCSOs have come in, and I'm not saying it's solely down to that, the crime has fallen within the Torfaen area, and I think we ought to be very proud of our part in helping with that by this particular initiative. So I am very much in favour of it. Now, I endorse what also Gunnar has said about the fact that police constables are fewer, apparently, in number. But that is the way in which the police have responded to public expenditure cutbacks, as we all have. They found a different way of dealing with these issues. And it is more effective than the old system. Police constables now, police officers actually go patrol in cars. They don't walk the beat. The PCSOs walk the beat. But then the police officers are then more able to get to particular crime scenes or problems as a consequence of being mobile. So I think the police have found a good way of actually dealing with the difficulties of fewer resources, pressure on resources, and the PCSOs, in some ways, because their powers are limited, are more effective. They are able to relate to ordinary people on the streets, whereas I don't want to say anything bad about police officers, but you sort of keep your distance from police officers, I think, because they are the figures of authority. Whereas PCSOs, well, I think all of you should follow my example, frankly. But I think the PCSOs are much more approachable because that is the way in which they carry out their work. They go out on foot and they walk the beat, and it's. You ought to go out with them. I was told by Michelle Booth that every member of this council would have the opportunity, if they wanted, to go out on patrol in their area with their PCSOs. And I really think you ought to do it. It's an eye-opener.
Right, well, we'll take advice on that, Brian. Anthony?
Of course, one of the main reasons why there's fewer police officers on our streets is that the fact that the government have cut the funding to the police by 20% over 2 years, which is unfortunate. And has consequences. I'm just glad that we're helping to sort of step into the breach and, as you say, provide support to some of the valuable work that our PCSOs do.
One of the unfortunate facts of being the last in the queue is that everybody else has stolen your thunder, I suppose. So I'll be short. The truth of it is, PCSOs now are the recognisable face of the police in all of our communities up and down the constituency. They do a tremendous job. They are, in a sense, a throwback to the days when bobbies patrolled the street. The PCSOs actually perform that function. And the question we need to ask ourselves in terms of whether or not we continue to support this in terms of a cost, if we withdrew the support, the £330,000 per annum, would that encourage the police to employ more bobbies? Well, the answer to that is no. So it seems to me to be a no-brainer. We have to continue supporting. If we want this valuable resource out on the streets, it's already been seen to have contributed to the reduction of crime, then we need to continue to support them with the £330,000. I recommend it wholeheartedly.
Thanks for that. Anybody else? Nobody else? All agree with the report, please show. Thanks so much. Thank you, Lyndon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Janine's with me as well if there's any points of detail as well, so it'll be very much a joint effort. The report is presented to you this morning for you to note the current status of SRS Business Solutions. The report takes you through the history of how we got to where we are and also sets out how it's operating currently and also what our projected sort of ambition is for the business as a whole. And clearly, it's, I hope you will feel the same as us, that this is very much a good news story for us to tell. So in terms of background, SRS Public was set up some time ago now to provide shared ICT services across Monmouthshire County Council, ourselves and Gwent Police. And deriving from that shared service was some interest from the private sector. They started having conversations with us and they felt that there was some opportunity, a business opportunity for us to share, to sell the spare capacity of racks that we have housed at Blaenavon through SRS Public. So from that interest really was how SRS Business Solutions was born, and it was created as a company with the prime purpose of trading surplus capacity from SRS Public to the private sector to generate revenue and profit which would be invested back into public services to the shareholder organisations which are Monmouthshire County Council and ourselves. Gwent Police, while supportive of the initiative, they don't have the powers to trade, unlike ourselves as local authorities. So whilst interested, they weren't able to participate in SRS Business Solutions. So with that background, back in May 2011, Cabinet approved the set-up of an arm's-length trading company, SRS Business Solutions, wholly owned by TCBC, ourselves and Monmouthshire County Council, using our powers under the Local Government Act 2003, Section 95. So we're able to trade. Acting as a company, so when we're operating as a company, when trading as a company, we are bound by the requirements of company law, which is very different to the requirements that we are bound to when operating as a local authority. The company has directors, which is a detail later in the report, and those directors are bound under that company law to act in the best interest of the company. So in section 410 of the report, I'll just take you through it. Well, I'll carry on anyway. And under section 410 of the report, under that company law, the company can secure contracts from private individuals and private companies through direct negotiations because these bodies are not subject to European procurement rules. However, if SRS Business Solutions were to provide services to the public sector, they could only win those services after going through a European tendering process. Under 413, any company must consider state aid, and through the external advice that we had when setting up the company and also since we've been operated in the company, the requirements of state aid have been satisfied and that has been supported with external legal advice. So under 414 in the report, we detail who the directors are of the company. And that's myself. There is a vacant post currently within Monmouthshire County Council. There's the leader, Councillor Wellington, and the deputy leader of Monmouthshire County Council, and Graham Russell, who acts as our company secretary. Section 5 of the report actually sets out the trading achievements to date, and like I said, it's very much a good news story. 3 contracts have been secured to date and further opportunities are in the pipeline. One of those contracts have resulted in £2.5 million of inward investment into the borough and into the area. And on the back of one of those contracts, we've arranged a profit share arrangement which will introduce a further revenue stream beyond RAC income over the life of the contract. So the opportunities from that joint venture are quite significant for us in terms of the benefit that can realise in Torfaen, very much supporting our digital regeneration strategy. Trading to date is identified again under section 5.1, and really this is typical of setting up any new sort of business. The first 2 years we operated at a loss, and the reason for that was because we needed time to set up the company and also the nature of the business. The contracts that we have now secured actually take time to develop and to get secured through the legal process. And it's through Janine's sort of tenacity and persistence that we've actually got those contracts and significant contracts in place. So 13-14, we are looking at a projected break-even position, and then 14-15, we're projecting a profit of about £10,000. Underneath that is payment that is actually paid directly from SRS Business Solutions into SRS Public. So SRS Public receive an income stream from SRS Business Solutions for the racks that SRS Business Solutions have sold. And in 13-14, SRS Public, we are projecting £55,500 going into SRS Public as income, and 14-15, £78,000. So that is, an income stream that is really coming into SRS Public as a result of the trade-in of SRS Business Solutions. And moving forward, we anticipate that to actually be increasing over the next couple of years. So really, in conclusion, it's very, very much a good news story. The company is trading and operating as it was intended. We are selling the racks, the surplus racks from SRS Public, and we are generating income to the public sector, and this is projected to grow over future years. And it is also beginning to contribute to our digital strategy and also, importantly, our medium-term financial strategy. So the purpose of the report is to note the current status of the company and the ongoing development of the company moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chris. Now, I'm privileged to know that Janine, and she can't obviously say it here, is in negotiations with a raft of different companies who are interested in taking part in this, and they have to be allowed to take their can you say anything about it at all, Janine?
We've got a pipeline of other contracts, so there's many other suppliers that deal with us on a monthly basis, often inquiring as to whether we have any further rack space, or also other services that potentially they could look to buy from us from an arm's length basis. So at the moment we've got probably half a dozen customers, potential future customers we're talking to. But as Christina mentioned, there's a lot of legal discussions to have before you proceed, but also in this nature they've got to do quite a lot of feasibility testing, and it takes quite a long time. The lead time is generally between 12 to 18 months.
Any questions?
Go on.
Dave?
What kind of capacity have you available as we speak? What's the total capacity that you're still able to accommodate? In terms of other contractees?
There are a number of surplus racks available in the SRS public at the moment, but that does change quite regularly. And it changes based on technological advancement, so things like virtualization. So we use software now to condense that. Also, we could change things by just organising and get rid of some data as we progress out of the legal obligations to hold data. So we've probably got, for now, within the realms of probably another 10 immediately available that we could pass on to the private sector. But there are other racks that we will look to try and release over the next 6 to 12 months as well.
So it isn't necessarily a finite amount of space that you have, because it changes all the time, because of new technology, because of new customers, and the variable demands of new customers, and that certainly has an impact on the amount of space that you have. So
been the case to date, and that's how we've managed to release the racks to date, is through these advancements and through rationalisation and efficiencies of our own practices.
Anybody else? If not, then all agree the report. Thanks so much. Thank you, Christina and Janine.
Thank you, Chair. And with your permission, I'd just like to bring Steve Williams along as well, so he can present part of it.
Steve, as members will know, is our ecologist.
Okay, the purpose of this report is to highlight issues relating to pollinated insects in the borough, and to outline practical measures that we as a council can take to encourage and increase the number of pollinating insects in the borough. So Steve will set out a bit of the background, and then I'll come back in a bit later on.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Thank you, Chair. Those of you who attended the members' seminar back in November will probably understand the gist of this Cabinet report. But just by way of a brief background, really, pollinating insects are an important contributor to our natural environment. It's estimated that around £430 million worth of services are provided by pollinators to the UK crop market. And if those pollinators disappeared, it would cost the economy £1.8 billion per year to rectify that. So what's the issue then? Pollinators are in decline, as is a fair bit of biodiversity these days. Honeybees, for example, have declined by a quarter over the last 20 years. And the key influences in the decline of these species is through loss of habitat and fragmentation of habitat. Pollinators require a variety of landscape features, species-rich grassland, street trees, and hedgerows and orchards and that sort of habitat. In terms of policy guidance on this, the Welsh Assembly or the Welsh Government produced a Pollinators Action Plan back in July last year, which set out what they think needs to be done to reverse declines in pollinators. There are a number of actions within that report which are laid at the door of local authorities.
One of those is to look at the local authority and how the local authority manages its green space and green infrastructure. As a result of a motion and followed up by a member seminar last November, we have come to this meeting today with this report. And this backs up policy that the local authority adheres to in terms of the Local Biodiversity Action Plan. The Local Service Board has an indicator that looks at how it manages, or how the local authority manages green space. But above all, local authority and all public bodies have a legal duty under Section 42 of the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act to have due regard to biodiversity. Furthermore, the proposals in this report chimes with local authority sustainable development obligations and some more of the policy obligations which are coming from Welsh Government in terms of the Future Generations Bill, Planning Bill and the Environment Bill. I understand we've got some pictures.
Yeah, I think they're hard copies there.
All right, okay. Okay, do you want to follow on that?
Yeah, okay. Okay, so given the context that Steve has outlined, what I will take you through now is what our proposals are for actually maximising opportunities for pollinators. Under Section 6 of the report, it sets out those proposals. This computer's so slow. Okay. The first proposal is to, which is detailed in 6.2, is to put in place a wildflower road corridor, which would take us up the spine of the county borough, so from Cwmbran Drive, right the way up to Blenavon. Many of you that have visited and driven down Malpas Road, our colleagues in Newport Council actually have done something very similar, and the impact of their work has been quite significant. So what we're proposing is that very thing, running up the spine of the borough. And so what we will do is plant a series of wildflowers, and they will be annual seeds that really will give us that big impact that we are looking to achieve. The second part of our proposals is around grassland management. Members are aware that we are responsible for large areas of grassland across the county borough, and we currently operate, I suppose, essentially a one-size-fits-all, and that we cut all grass every fortnight across the county borough. We've identified, officers have looked across the area, and we've identified areas of roadside verges, banks, embankments and park areas which are not used as regularly as other areas, and we've identified those areas that we can actually encourage wild grassland. So as such, what that means is that we won't cut the grass every 2 weeks. We would be looking to cut that grass about once, twice a year. Ideally, in order to get the maximum ecological benefit from that grass, it's better to take that grass away. We currently don't have the machinery to do that, and we are working with our colleagues in Newport to see if we can actually share their machinery because they have it in place already. But even if we left the grass in situ, the advice that Steve has given us is that there is still ecological benefit in leaving that grass in situ. Cleansing of those areas, as we cut our grass normally every 2 weeks, and we also cleanse areas across the borough every 2 weeks. These areas that we will be leaving, we are proposing that cleansing will only take place on a quarterly basis on those areas, because if we go in there more frequently, we will disturb the establishment of the wildflowers. But we accept that there needs to be a balance there as well, and if we are getting complaints in those areas, we will need to have a look at how we deal with that. The third area of our proposal is around wildflower seeding in other areas of the borough. So we've identified a spinal column running up through the borough for wildflowers. And what we want to do is work with other community groups, yourselves as local ward members, our colleagues in the RSLs, to identify external sources of funding to plant up wildflower areas in the localities. And that will be very much done working with elected members and the general public, because it really does need to be owned and understood by the public what we're trying to achieve here. The fourth element of our proposal is really looking at seeking opportunities from using our existing resources. That includes developers, so working with our colleagues in planning. When we are speaking early with potential developers, we want to maximise the opportunities we can get from any new development for ecology. There are opportunities through currently Section 106, but also moving forward under SIL that we would look to maximise. We are proposing some holistic communications across the council as well to promote what we are trying to achieve, and which that very much follows the aspirations in our local biodiversity action plan. And there are lots of other things that we are essentially going to do under that theme. Point 5 of this proposal actually identifies other opportunities that we can look at, but we're unable to deliver them without external funding being made available. And bear with me a second, I'll find it. There. Okay, so under 6.6 there is a list of other works that we will look to try and deliver, but obviously it will be very much dependent on external funding. Steve mentioned in his introduction as well, in terms of policy context, the green infrastructure strategy. Officers across the council have been developing the green infrastructure strategy, and there's still a bit of work to do. But once as we've achieved that, what that strategy will give us is a strategy of how we can most effectively manage the land that we have in our ownership for ecological benefit, and not only ecological benefit, but for the benefit of the council as a whole. So there's still a bit of work stream that is ongoing there, and Steve, whilst coordinating that, it is very much a whole council approach that we're taking in delivering that strategy. So that is the proposal that we're presenting to you as Cabinet. It is a whole departmental approach to ecology. It involves officers across street scene, my countryside team, and coordination through Steve as our ecologist. The next steps, if you're minded to approve this, is that we would proposing to take this report into Council for members to consider it more fully. And our next steps would be very much to engage with members on a local basis, so that members understand the areas we've identified and that they're in agreement with the areas that we've identified. Thank you.
Chris, John?
Well, as Christina said, this is a tripartite sort of portfolio with yourself, Lewis, and myself. A lot of these initiatives have already taken place, Christina, haven't they? Some the walk up through Llanrhaven, I can't remember where it is now, I've been there and walked there. But of course there's also, and I don't want to put any figures to this, there's going to be a cost implication in doing this, but there's also going to be saving implications. And so it's, there could be some financial benefits, albeit not that great, but benefits to doing this. And, but it's going to cost us in the beginning. But there has been a number of initiatives which are quite good, and you can see them now, but I would certainly support this initiative.
Yes, certainly excellent report, very topical as well. But additional to the spinal column of traffic running from Blanhaven down to Cumran or whatever, is there any possibility we could look at liaising with the community councils in planting up somewhere down the cycle track? Because the cycle track follows the old mineral railway line, and when the railway line was there, always used to be flowers and whatever all the way down. So, is there any possibility we could look at that?
Yeah, I'm sure Steve will come in now, but I know we're already doing a lot of work down the cycleway in planting wildflowers. And the community councils, we work with them already very closely, but moving forward under this policy, they are one of our key partners as well, that we would be looking to use the funding that they are able to bring to the table. Just picking up Councillor Cunningham's point, there's one thing I didn't include in the report, but in terms of the financial implications of this proposal, in order to plant the spinal corridor that I referred to, that would be about £10,000. And I'm quite confident that I can actually cover those costs with a sponsorship because it's a prime location for companies to sponsor. And there would be savings in cleansing, which we've calculated to be about £30,000. So the net effect of this proposal, worst case scenario, is a saving of £20,000, which I'm proposing to put in as part of my departmental savings that Nigel touched upon in his report earlier today. Steve, I don't know whether you want to add anything else?
Yeah, just briefly, following on from what Christina said, I think this report is all about making our green space work better for us, not just for pollinators, which is the subject of this report, but also for people as well. I think it's been well recognised that access to green space, access to varied green space is good for people's well-being. So this is part and parcel of that approach, really. And we will work with anybody who are able to help us deliver aspirations along these lines.
Yes, thanks for the report. I'm really pleased about this because, as you know, Christina, I've been working with Keep Wales Tidy, who have been very supportive in giving us some funding to achieve small-scale schemes like this. But I'm pleased to know that you're going to be talking to the local members, because we have areas within our own area that we would like to do this project in. So thanks for that, and hopefully you'll give us your knowledge for us to be able to support this scheme. Thanks very much.
Just a very specific question. In 6.6 under 5B, you talk about urban street trees. What can we do to encourage new development, to encourage developers to consider that as part of their plans?
This is obviously a development control issue. It's important where there's proposals for new development, that green space and the planting in that green space is considered just as much as the actual built environment. So it is probably an issue that is part and parcel of the land use planning process. I work very closely with colleagues in planning and development control, and wherever there's an opportunity, I always encourage the green space to be considered alongside the built environment and with a suitable planting scheme. It's generally native species, but obviously there will be opportunities for more sort of ornamental planting. But certainly the development control process, and developers have an important role to play in satisfying or helping us with our green space and pollinator actions.
Right, thanks for that. I want to make a comment. About 3 years ago, I picked up a booklet that had been, more than a booklet, a substantial document actually, where places like Birmingham and various other places in England had done this, and there were some striking pictures in there in terms of what was possible. Now, anybody that went to Newport last year, or indeed went from Newport onto the Chepstow Road, could not fail to be staggered by what Newport had achieved. And patently we want to do that as well. But this is twofold. It's not only about pollinators, this is about telling the public in Torvine that we want our areas to be looking good. And so part of it is selling that image. And to do that, you must come up the centre of the borough. You must go on the bus route so that people travelling on buses can see what we've achieved. There's a couple of things that I got a little bit of concern of since I read this once or twice, and I mentioned it to Nigel earlier on, and you've just mentioned it now about we would need to borrow. This specific machinery that's needed to do this, you can't do it with just your conventional machinery. There are bits of machinery that you need to have to do this. And all right, you say Newport have got it. Well, that's fine, and if we can share with them, then that's good. What you didn't mention, which I know you are keen to work with, we need to work with Bronavon on this. They've got officers. I've had meetings with our officers and their officers that really understand this, as indeed I'm sure our officers do. But I am concerned about whether we can achieve the central reservation without machinery. That's the one point. And the other point is, I hope that all the voluntary organisations, and indeed any groups of people that feel they've got a little area that they could cultivate and produce wildflowers, like some of these photographs that we've seen here, they're quite outstanding. We'd like to do that right away. So my question is, if you don't have that machinery and you can't get a loan of it or make a deal or do whatever you're going to do with Newport, does that mean that the central reservation won't be done?
The machinery the machinery required in order to do the Spine Road, we have, so we can deliver that ourselves. The machinery that we don't have is the machinery required to take away the grassland, the grassed areas that we won't be cutting as frequently. So as a first port of call, we are discussing that with Newport, because it makes sense if they've got it to share it. If that avenue isn't fruitful, we would look to obtain that machinery using external funding opportunities. So that's our course of action. But we still can, the ecological benefit of leaving that grassland in situ is still positive, albeit it would be much more improved and much larger if we were able to take the grass away.
Question. We do know that the less you cut the grass, the more money you save as a department. And I would have thought any money saved on non-cutting grass should, in terms of a priority, should be allocated to this scheme. Because it's the same department, and if you're saving money on cutting the grass, then that money should be paid to plant and do things like this. Anyway, I hope the public take cognizance of it, and we want as many groups and as many areas that are interested to come with us on this one to do that. And other than that, I think it's an excellent piece of work you're doing, and well done as a department. Anybody else want to say anything? Or, go on, you want to...
In terms of the pictures that you've got as part of your pack, you mentioned the work they've done in Newport. The first picture, I think, is a photograph from Newport. And I know that they got a lot of good publicity out of managing their verges and planting them with wildflowers. Just to pick up on the question in terms of going back to the question about planning, I understand Newport used Section 106 monies as part pay for some of the work they did in Newport. So there is it's going back to the previous question about planning. There are opportunities, I think, through the planning process.
Anybody else, or we can clear on that then? Well done as a department, and all agreed? Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'll be very quick with this report. As the purpose of the report is to seek approval to put in place an order to divert the public footpath number 295 to allow the development of the former Mill Tavern site. The development entails demolition of a public house, the erection of 5 dwellings and some ancillary works. So the application has been made by the developer, Millbrook Homes, and planning permission for that development was granted back in June 2012. We've received 3 objections to the proposed diversions, each of which we've considered and responded to. Works are currently ongoing on the site, and a temporary prohibition of pedestrians order has been made in the interest of public safety to allow those construction works to take place. So really that's the background to the report and the key points, and I'm seeking approval to divert the public footpath.
Any comments? All agree with the report? Pretty sure. Thanks very much, Christina. I usually got my assistant on my right-handed. Right, Sue, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Hopefully this one won't be too long. I'm going to assume members have read the report. What I'm looking for here is for members to note the plan to establish a national adoption service supported by a regional collaborative, and to also secure agreement from Cabinet that Torfaen continues in the current collaborative arrangement to extend from our current arrangements from Blaenau Gwent, Monmouthshire and ourselves to create a South East Wales regional adoption collaborative incorporating the 5, I describe them as Greater Gwent, neighbouring local authorities. I've given you some key messages there. So this proposal is building on what we have already. Since 2011, we already formed that three-way service, and that was built in on something we'd started with Monmouthshire in 1996 on an informal basis. So this is a pathway we've been on for quite a significant time, trying to improve adoption services, provide some economies of scale, and obviously now the national government, as part of their social services and wellbeing plans, are planning to see this happening right across Wales. And just to remind members of what the adoption service actually gives, and that's set out there at 5.1. It is about looking at the whole service. So that's about any child who, where placement under adoption is the best option for them, that they can't return to their own family for whatever reason. And that's from very young babies, and sometimes that process starts even with the unborn child when we know that's potentially the outcome. It's also for adults who are seeking information and support as prospective adopters, or for people who were adopted and for any information they may need about the past. And that's some of the reasons why we have to keep records for 75 years in social care and housing, because very often things will come back many years later when an adult may require information and advice about why were they adopted, what was their birth family, etc. And I think sometimes a lot of us forget that it is that whole system that our adoption service provides. So I've described to you what's happening in terms of a national direction, and that's set out there in terms of the expectations and the benefits of that national system under 4.6. That will be underpinned by some national standardised performance framework. So again, each regional adoption service will be measured and benchmarked, if you like, against its other parts of Wales. At 4.8, I've told you the distinction between what the National Adoption Service will be responsible for, and then at 4.9, the Regional Adoption Collaborative, that's set out there for you. Welsh Government are expecting one lead authority in each of the areas to take the lead and be the host and manage the service. Already in this area, Blaen y Gwent acts as the lead and manage the service, so our proposals are not significantly different to what we have in place. Just to remind you at 5.3, we can't delegate our responsibility or accountability, but what we can delegate are functions that other agencies can carry out on our behalf, and this fits within that requirement there. So we retain accountability and responsibility for our own children, but we can collaborate with others to manage those services. Just another thing to remind members of, the agency decision maker, that's the ultimate decision maker in the council who agrees with the recommendation from the frontline staff that adoption is in this child's best interest. And that's a function that I've retained personally, because I think it's important that it is kept at the director level, and also Keith shares that with me as my deputy. In some areas that's delegated lower down the system, but it's another way of ensuring consistency by having that retained at the director level. And ultimately the courts will decide. So, we will make the case, we will present all the evidence, but the courts ultimately decide. So it's a very prescriptive service, a lot of legislation behind it that you have to follow. So just take you straight down to 8.2. And that's setting out there some of the implications and the resourcing issues in particular. And there's only a minor resourcing issue because we are now collaborating. We can't fit everybody in the current space they are. So we're having to find new accommodation. That's still being negotiated, but it's not a significant issue for us. But it will be outweighed by the benefits we achieve through efficiency on back office functions, advertising and recruiting new prospective adopters, and improving our timescales for getting people through that court system by using the South East Wales Consortium. So, you know, it's a minimal risk, and it's a requirement anyway that we move into a South East Wales setup, so it's one of those areas that we can't avoid. I've also pointed out there on 8.4, because across Wales the numbers of looked after children are rising, and there's an estimated gap of, for every child, or for every person who's potentially an adopter, there are 10 children waiting. And in England at the moment, they're introducing what's called an adoption passport. So, you know, we're still near enough to England where that could be a risk for us, where adopters in England may be in a more advantaged position. So some adopters may seek approval in England to be an adoptive parent rather than staying within Wales. But we'll monitor that and manage that, and obviously the National Board will be keeping an eye on that. We've already had, there will be staff impacted, potentially, less so in Torfaen, because we're already in this collaborative arrangement. So we've had all the informal discussions, but obviously subject to your approval today, we'll then start formal negotiations with trade unions, but there's minimal impact for us. Measures of success, I've showed those out for you there, and it is about improving the service to both children and adoptive parents. So I'm looking for my recommendations there are to note the report, particularly what's happening on a national level, agree the proposal that Torfaen will continue to be part of the South East Wales service, and agree that Blaenau Gwent will continue to act as the host authority.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Happy
you,
to take
Sue.
questions.
Any comments? If not, all agree the report. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Sue.
Okay. Again, I'll try and pick out just the key points. What we're looking here for is for Cabinet to agree the award of an extra care contract for the delivery of personal care, the new Kynand extra care scheme, based on the Brookfield site in Cwmbran. I've set out to you the tendering process that were very robust, supported by Andy Macy and colleagues from Finance and Legal. We've got, a really good process now, I think, across the Council in going through these tenders. I won't go through the detail of the process there. Hopefully you've read that. I guess the key thing for me is we always include an element of service user input, and you can see that reflected in the way that has helped create the final scores. The analysis there of the various providers and their scores are presented in the report. And I'm looking for Cabinet to agree to the award of the contract to Company 8. But if Company 8 withdraws from the award of contract, then we've got some reserve companies in, Company 10 or 1, so that we have a fallback position if anything happens during the negotiation of those contracts. I've mentioned in the report a very small element of risk in terms of 2P, but it's a tiny risk, and the usual employment law process would be followed. So it's nothing for you to worry about. I just felt it was important to put it in the report. So hopefully the report is self-explanatory, and I'm looking for you to accept my recommendation to award the contract to Company 8.
Thank you very much, Sue. All agreed on the report? Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sue.